The October Community Day Pokemon has been revealed to be Litwick. Litwick Community Day is happening Saturday, October 15th from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. local time with that typical Community Day raid extension that I don't think a lot of people actually participate in. At any rate, Litwick, if you evolve it all the way into a Chandelure during the Community Day hours, it'll know the special attack Poltergeist, which is revealed here to be a 140 base power attack for both raids and in PvP. So in this video, I'm going to let you guys know just how good Poltergeist could be on Chandelure in both PvP and in raids. Can it compete with Shadow Ball, or will it just be this meme attack that is second to Shadow Ball? Also, if you want to reference any of this material in a text-based format, make sure to check out my article on GamePress, Poltergeist Chandelure and its place in the meta, link in the description of course, covering basically everything I'm going to be talking about in this video, but in a text-based format. So starting out with the raid side of things, Poltergeist is a 140 base power attack, so we can basically assume it's going to have a 100 energy cost. If it were to have a 50 energy cost, I'd be pretty surprised, and it'd have to have like a really long animation time to back it up, but if it did end up being a 50 energy cost charge move, that'd be pretty fantastic for it. But as it stands, I think it's safe to assume that it's going to be a 100 energy cost charge move, just like anything that penetrates, over 100 damage. So when it comes to how good it's going to be, it's mostly going to come down to what the animation time is, the cooldown of the charge move, because if it has a long cooldown, well then that's a long amount of time that you're not doing damage, and then it also makes you susceptible to getting KO'd while you're trying to do the charge move, which may make the damage not register. So if it has a low animation time, a low cooldown, then that would be pretty fantastic for it. So what could we compare this to? Well, recently we got Meteor Beam as a exclusive community attack for Gigalith there, which ended up being pretty fantastic for PvP, and it had a 1.9 second cooldown. If Poltergeist has the same kind of cooldown, then I feel like Poltergeist could actually compete with Shadow Ball. Here I have a custom-made table from the GamePress DPS TDO spreadsheet here, highlighting the advantage or the improvement that Poltergeist with a 1.9 second cooldown could have over Shadow Ball. And you can see here that on average, it's going to have a 0.2 higher advantage over the Shadow Ball Chandelure, putting it more on par with Gengar when it comes to DPS and raids. Now, this doesn't sound terribly impressive, but Poltergeist is a single bar charge move, which brings some advantages and disadvantages along with it. What I'm trying to say is that when it comes to single bar charge moves, you do have a degree of energy or damage waste, because if you go over 100 energy, well, that energy all gets wasted, where with Shadow Ball being a 50 energy cost, you're throwing it as soon as you hit 50, so any overflow could go towards the next Shadow Ball. On top of that, if you don't reach 100 energy before getting KO'd, well then that's all that potential damage that you're going to be missing out on. That said, if you're able to land a Poltergeist and then swap out your Chandelure, or your Chandelure gets like KO'd immediately after, well then there could be some real high value going on with the Poltergeist here. To illustrate, I made kind of a average DPS over time table using simulations from PokeBattler.com, comparing the Poltergeist, Chandelure, Gengar, and Blacephalon against each other to show like how these charge moves kind of interact, right? So you can see that Gengar and Blacephalon, both of which are being simulated with a Shadow Ball attack, have a relatively smooth line after the raid begins, where Chandelure has these high peaks and low valleys, which is, associated with the 100 energy cost of the charge move. And you can see that these peaks can occasionally peak over the average DPS of Gengar and Blacephalon. Blacephalon is a Ultra Beast Pokemon, if you're not familiar, and it's probably going to be the best Ghost type attacker once it comes out, but until then, you got Chandelure and Gengar as like the budget options, and you can also XL these two Pokemon a little bit more cost effectively than Blacephalon if you're not up to speed on who the Blacephalon is. At any rate, Chandelure does have some interesting advantages over Gengar with these peaks and valleys. Blacephalon, obviously, crazy good. But focusing on the Chandelure v Gengar here, though, ways that you could potentiate these spikes being more spiky for you is to bring it into a raid boss, like mid-raid, that hasn't used a charge move yet. So the sooner it uses a charge move on you, the sooner you can turn that damage into energy to accelerate you to that peak here. And then to add to that, if you know the next charge move is going to take out your Chandelure before you're reasonably going to reach the next Poltergeist, you could swap Chandelure out into another Pokemon, maybe another Poltergeist Chandelure, to gobble up that damage and turn that damage into energy to turn it into more charge attacks. To add to that, Chandelure still has Shadow Ball, so you could go with that doubled up moveset, which is a strategy some Pokemon can use really effectively. A lot of dragons have this situation, a lot of grass types have this situation, where you make up for the downtime of the single bar charge move or the limitations of the single bar charge move by using a lower energy cost charge move. So you're in that situation where you know you're not going to reach another Poltergeist before you get KO'd, but you do reach the Shadow Ball, well then you could use the Shadow Ball for another little baby spike in DPS before your Chandelure gets taken out. So as it stands, on average, Gengar is going to be outperforming the Chandelure, but if you're able to take advantage of these peaks in DPS, then the Chandelure could be a very potent option to add to your team. Just to focus on Blacephalon again here, for those that aren't aware, I have Blacephalon simulated in this chart using both Shadow Claw and Astonish. And even with Astonish, which is an astonishingly bad fast move, the Shadow Ball is able to carry it. But if Blacephalon doesn't carry Shadow Ball, then it might not have anything close to the performance that we're currently simming out here. Another interesting future Pokemon on this list is also Dragapult. Dragapult is going to be a little bit lower on the DPS side, but it does have some pretty good thickness there, basically being a higher DPS version of the Giratina origin form. So another cool future Pokemon to keep your eyes out for. And if you're curious about how Dark types work out in this mix here, I also have the DPS TDO spreadsheet here sorted against a Psychic type raid boss, so we get both Dark and Ghost type Pokemon because, you know, they both hit Ghost and Psychic type Pokemon. Pheromosa snuck in here because it's a Psychic type raid, not a Ghost type raid. Pheromosa is quite strong for that Spike DPS, Glass Cannon type Pokemon. But yeah, you can see here against the non-Shadow, Ghost, and Dark type Pokemon, Chandelure is, you know, on top, basically where it was before. If you're curious where our good friend Hydreigon is, if I sort it by DPS to the third power times TDO, then you can see Hydreigon appear from the darkness as a very, very powerful boy. But that DPS is lacking just a smidge. So if you do want that tankiness, Hydreigon is a really good option for raids, no doubt whatsoever. It's just, you know, the Ghost types dish out a little bit more damage. They're just a smidge more aggressive than our dragon friend is here in those raids. So when it comes to Poltergeist in PvP, things get a little bit more sketchy, right? Because when it comes to 140 base power attacks, we only have Blizzard and Fire Blast to compare to, which have 75 and 80 energy costs respectively. If Poltergeist has this high of an energy cost, then it's probably going to be completely worthless on Chandelure. For it to have any potential on Chandelure whatsoever, it would have to have at least a 70 energy cost. That way, if you pair it with the Flame Charge, then it can sync up with the same kind of timing as a Flame Charge into a Shadow Ball would have on an Incinerate moveset on Chandelure. Aside from that specific scenario though, a 70 energy cost on the Poltergeist there will always have it one attack behind the Shadow Ball. And then to add to the Flame Charge kind of situation, if you do Poltergeist with Flame Charge, if you're planning on your Chandelure ever using a third charge move in that battle, which the thing is so glassy, I doubt that it'll actually get to one, but if you are thinking that it could get to a third charge move, well then the Poltergeist with its energy cost would put it far enough behind where you'd have to use a whole extra Incinerate, which is a lot of time in PvP to be doing nothing, hoping you can reach another charge move. So I don't expect it to have a whole lot of impact. Now, if it had a 60 energy cost, alternatively, well then that would be insane for many reasons. Like, it would be significantly better than most charge moves that we currently have in the game, and it doesn't have any drawbacks associated with it, so it would just be kind of crazy OP at a 60 energy cost. If it had that though, I don't think Chandelure would still be all that good in PvP because it has this weird, like, Glass Cannon, probably never going to be anything more than a Spice Pick kind of niche going on. So I'm not expecting a whole lot from Poltergeist, but there is some potential, if it has a 70 energy cost, for it to be a spicy addition to Chandelure's move pool for where it works out. Now, if you are curious about Chandelure's viability in PvP altogether, it is still just kind of like a spice meme Pokemon that can shine in cups sometimes. I've seen it used in the Master League intelligently a couple times as well, but for the most part, Chandelure just ain't it for PvP, but it can shine sometimes. So you may want to be mindful of Chandelure PvP IVs. And as it stands, with Incinerate being its main fast move of choice, you're probably going to want to focus on high bulk. Now, when it comes to high bulk, do you want to have higher HP? Do you want to have higher defense? Or do you just want to go for the max stat product? I guess if you guys are interested, let me know in the comments. I could look into that briefly and do a little Chandelure PvP IV, like, I don't know, swim, and see if you want higher defense or higher HP, or just go for the rank 1. But as it stands, I don't think it's anything worth splitting hairs over, because Chandelure doesn't really pop up that often, aside from a goofy spice pick or a goofy spice pick in a cup where it might maybe work. So that's all I gotta say right now about Chandelure and the Poltergeist in Pokemon Go. Overall, I don't think it matters too much that Poltergeist isn't making big waves in the meta, because it's such a cool looking shiny. It's a new shiny Pokemon. It's one that people have been asking for a long time. So I'd say overall, I'm pretty pleased with the situation here. And Poltergeist does have the right kind of situation going on where it could be a pretty good move for Chandelure in both raids and PvP, although, you know, not rising it to a whole new level where we're like, oh my god, Chandelure, we must have this Pokemon. At any rate, if you got any questions on this content, of course, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoyed this kind of content and you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips.
SwagTips.
I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description. I know you guys have been waiting very patiently for the Galar Stunfisk PvP IV deep dive. I finally have all the numbers together, and it should be out tomorrow, so soon you will know about the Stunfisk.